Good evening, YouTube, and welcome to another edition of Paisano's Music and Vinyl Talk. I am your host, Paisano. Tonight, we're going to talk about Jimi Hendrix. The Jimi Hendrix Experience, to be a little more specific, and their American debut at the Monterey Pop Festival in California in June of 1967. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the origins of Jimi Hendrix and how he became to be the Jimi Hendrix we all know and love. Quite possibly the greatest rock and roll guitarist of all time. You could, debate that with, at least 5 or 6 other names. The title of greatest, but to me, Hendrix was the most innovative, an originator. His imagination and his experimentation laid the groundwork for everything that we know today and everything that came after it. Without Hendrix, things would have been quite different. There's no doubt about that. And for that, I call him the greatest. Jimi Hendrix was an American, and he grew up in Seattle, Washington, and he got into the Army in the late 50s and to early 60s. I think he was only in for a couple of years. He was a paratrooper, and he injured his ankle, and from all accounts, he wasn't the best soldier, and he received an honorable discharge. I think they just kind of wanted to get rid of him, to be honest with you. He was a true rock and roll rebel from the get-go. He was already playing the guitar, and he had hooked up in there with a bass player by the name of Billy Cox, who he ended up doing some work with after the Experience broke up in the Band of Gypsies. He was an old Army buddy. But for our discussion here, Jimi Hendrix went on after the Army. He started playing backup guitar for groups like the Isley Brothers. He backed up Little Richard, a rock and roll legend, for a little while. And he did some studio work. He did some studio work for a lot of musicians, a lot of black musicians mostly. And he was just kind of bumming around doing this and that. And the Animals bassist, Chaz Chandler, after the Animals kind of broke up in the mid-60s, 65, 66, they weren't having the hits they were, and I don't know if they outright broke up, but Chaz Chandler was getting into more of a managerial type role, and he saw Jimi Hendrix performing, and he liked what he saw. And I believe he saw him in America, and he took him over to England and hooked him up with Noel Redding, who was a bass player, and Mitch Mitchell, who was a drummer. And the three of them together were the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And they proved to be, one of the greatest trios, right up there with Cream and the original Mountain, and just one of the great trios. I mean, talent like you wouldn't believe in every area, and with Jimi doing most of the writing. Like Jimi always said, he didn't have the best voice, but he had a good enough voice to carry him through. And they toured Europe. The Jimi Hendrix Experience did. They toured Europe, England, obviously, and they got a chance to come to America and make their American debut at a festival. Now, festivals were kind of a novelty in 1967. Woodstock had not yet happened for another couple of years, and all those other ones, Newport, Altamont, and the Atlanta Pop Festival, those were all a couple of years away. So this was the Monterey Pop Festival, and this is the first time a recording showcased his entire performance there. And this was released in 1986 on Reprise, I believe. Yes, Reprise Records. And there's a shot of the back cover. It's Jimi on stage at the show. And Jimi was very nervous, obviously. His playing didn't show that he was nervous, but the dialogue in between songs, he was definitely a little bit nervous, making his American debut, and all he wanted to impress, and he sure did. Let me tell you something, he blew the roof off of this place, even though it didn't have a roof, it was all outside. But the track listing reads like this. On side 1 you got Killing Floor, which is an old blues standard done Jimi Hendrix style, and that's one of my favorite live cuts from him. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, I mean, everyone knows him as a terrific lead player, but he was a phenomenal rhythm guitar player. Just criminally underrated, or just not recognized as a rhythm guitar player, but man, he could do it all. Foxy Lady follows that up. And then a cover, like a 8-minute cover of Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan follows that. And it's just gold. It's just fantastic. After that, Rock Me Baby. And side 1 finishes with Hey Joe, which was, I think, his first single over in England. Hey Joe was. Side 2 starts with Can You See Me, The Wind Cries Mary, the great and classic Purple Haze, and finishes with Wild Thing. A Wild Thing stretches out for quite a while. Jimi showcasing his ability to conjure feedback and his wild sounds. That would be his trademark, getting sounds out of the instrument that nobody even dreamed of up to that point. And this is, I got this in 1986. It was a brand new release then. Probably got it at Quincy Records, I would say. They had a very good rock and roll section there. Let's take a look at the vinyl. Came in a generic sleeve. They didn't really spend too much money on packaging for this one, although they should have. It was a tremendous release. It's a classic Reprise label right there. And it's one of the highlights of my record collection. It plays well. It's been played a lot, no doubt about it. I played the crap out of this as a 18, 19, 20-year-old. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our discussion about the great Jimi Hendrix tonight. And if you're enjoying our discussions, I would appreciate it if you liked the video, and more importantly, subscribe to my channel. I'd appreciate it very much. Until next week, when we see what Paisano will dig out of the crates. Good night, YouTube, and thank you.